I'm seeing more people coming out and saying like, hey, it's okay for you to want to be a wife, and it's okay for a man to want to provide and protect. There's a giant attack on traditional family. Yes. And there has been so many young people that even I personally know of that are saying like, I want to break out of this. What's going on in the world isn't right.
Welcome to Matters of Soul Importance, where we dive deeply into topics of both earthly and eternal consequence. I'm Roxanne Solonen, faith columnist and features writer for the Forum, author, and speaker. In this episode, I ask Max and Micah Fischer, where did all the young faith-filled families go? With every episode of Matters of Soul Importance, there's a side story of how the guest entered my life. I met Max when he came to our home one day to work on a plumbing issue. Though I generally don't talk to service people very much, Max was amiable and we struck up a conversation. At some point, the topic of this podcast came up and Max was immediately attentive, asking what it's about. When I explained my focus, we talked further, and by the time he was done with his work, I was inviting Max and his wife Micah to be guests here to talk about faith in younger generations. But there's another story here because when I asked Max his name so I could reach out to him, something rang a bell, and I recalled many years ago working in the temporary childcare room for parents working out of our local YMCA. Max's mother was another of the parent workers our supervisor, Pam, had hired to assist in the playroom while mothering our own children. It's very likely that I changed Max's diapers a time or two. Yes, life does have an interesting way of circling around, and though Max might be embarrassed at my realization and my sharing it here, it's also true that Max is now adept at changing diapers himself as a father of a growing family. Truly, it is a pleasure to talk to this young couple about their faith and some of the challenges of living as a faithful Christian in today's world. I have a feeling they're going to present some hope for the younger generations and maybe even give those of us older parents and grandparents who've been praying on the sidelines some hope too. Now let's get to the good stuff so this sweet couple can share who they are and what drives them. Well, welcome, Max and Micah. So nice to have you here.
Yes, we're excited to be here.
Yeah, so I have this question that I'm going to, hopefully you'll help me answer today, which is where did all the young faith-filled families go? And here you are today, one of those faith-filled families, and I'm excited to hear from you. I'm middle-aged, 55, almost 56, and so that's kind of where I was placed in this world, and things have changed a little bit, but I have kids your age, and it's always good to hear from the different generations to kind of find out where your hearts are at, and so I just am thinking about our conversation, Max, in my lower level of the home when you were in doing some work, and I can't even remember how it all went, but somehow I think I was working on my podcast, and so you started asking about that, and pretty soon you wondered what kind of podcast, and it just kind of seemed like a little spark happened. So that was kind of fun, and then I realized I knew you when you were a baby, which makes me feel really old.
Isn't that crazy, though?
It's
just
really
how
crazy.
Small the world is.
Yeah, when I heard your last name, I'm like, wait, how is that spelled? Because there's different spellings of Fischer. And I'm like,
because I changed your diaper.
I know a couple of your family members. I might have changed your diaper. But anyway, so that kind of puts it in perspective here. But here you are, all grown up and with your lovely wife.
Yeah.
And so, I want to find out first, let's just start with how did you meet? Let's get to know you as a couple. How old were you and how did it happen? I'm sure you each have slightly different versions. That's how it goes. But
so we went to school with each other, so high school with each other. But we were never really close in high school. It was interesting because our friend groups kind of merged, but we never really hung out with each other.
Yeah, so we had never interacted or even met really.
So a lot of my friends would hang out with her friend group and vice versa. So it was weird because we always kind of knew of each other but didn't know each other. And then we actually connected on an online dating platform.
Tinder.
Kind
of embarrassing.
It's one of the things that shows the generation. Yeah. We didn't have that.
Yep.
So,
and it was, I don't know, we both knew of each other. So we're like, oh, hey, she was like, you want to come and meet up with me and a couple of friends at Applebee's? And the rest was just kind of history. We hit it off right away. And yeah.
How old were you by then?
Yeah, so I was 20 and he was 21. Yeah. We kind of just like hung out that one time at Applebee's, and then we hung out like every single day after that. And I
just didn't leave her apartment after that.
Pretty much.
So at what point I'm sure the faith connection kind of came in there at some point. If you're a young Christian, you're looking for that in someone else. Was that an important part of it, or was it more like, I think she's cute, I think he's cute?
Yeah, so it's actually interesting because Max didn't really have a relationship with God at all when we had met, and my relationship was really lacking with God. So it's interesting because for us, I feel like our relationship really grew once we were already starting our family. I was pregnant, and we had kind of gone through a lot, and we were really struggling, and I think we were kind of searching for this void we were missing, and we were trying to find it in each other, and we realized that I think, God was that missing part, and that is really where our faith like took a jump. For me, Max told me he didn't really know if he believed in God, and I told him that, it was really important to me to be with someone who believed in God because I was raised Christian.
Okay.
And he told me that it was something that he would always work on. And for me, that was enough. So, yeah.
It's a start, something to work with. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and I never really knew like what a relationship with God was because I grew up in a really, really small Catholic church, and the way that I was raised, church to me growing up felt more like a chore almost. It was never like a fun thing for me. So, I just didn't know what that felt like. And when we found our church and I started going to church and started getting involved in church, and then just through knowing Micah too, I kind of felt what it was like to actually have a relationship with God. And I started doing a little bit more of my own digging, and I realized how awesome and how much of a blessing it is to have that in my life. So.
Well, and she's like, you gotta have something, or I'm gonna get away.
Yeah. Which I'm glad that she pushed me in that direction. I really am. So.
It's interesting thinking of every they say, I didn't used to know what this meant, but they say that God doesn't have grandchildren. I'm like, what does that even mean? It means that every generation has to meet him for themselves. They can't just inherit it from their family. Although certainly seeds are planted, and you each had some kind of Christian underpinning. So there was something there. There were some little seeds there.
Yeah.
What do you think it was? It's interesting. So you're going through kind of difficult times. What made you, Micah, do you think, kind of reach into that part of the past that you knew there was something life-giving there?
Yeah. So for me, I was really involved in church. My parents didn't really go to church a whole lot, but my grandparents were super involved. So they actually came and picked us up every single Sunday and took us to church. And for me, I loved that, but that's not what really I felt the Holy Spirit when I went to summer Bible camps. And that's where I really felt God. And I was like, wow, this is real. This God is here. And then I really kind of grew from that. When I got older, I kind of fell away from that. And then kind of the struggles we went through, we met and we were both just in this partying lifestyle. I feel like so many people around here are into just drinking and partying. And we were both kind of angry people. We were kind of angry, very sarcastic, which I don't think there's anything wrong with being sarcastic, but just kind of mean, jokingly mean even. And we were pretty negative. And one of my friends brought us to her church, which is Northview. And I think that I really felt the Holy Spirit's presence within that church. And I just kind of, as I sat there every Sunday, it was really tough to get Max to go every Sunday at the beginning, but the messages started just resonating with me and being so specific almost to my life that I was like, this is not, this has to be from God. I mean, this isn't just a one-off thing. It was every Sunday, and I was diving into my Bible, really growing in my faith and my relationship. And I think those problems and struggles that I was facing, and I don't know if I mentioned this before, but kind of feeling like a void. And it kind of felt like I was starting to feel like filled up. And so, and I wasn't so insecure. I feel like internally my whole life I've been so insecure and had such bad anxiety. And since I've like grown in my relationship with God, it's like, I wouldn't say it's been like washed away, because I definitely still deal with that, but I feel like I can cope with it so much better. And I've learned so much just from having a relationship with God and feeling so secure and knowing I'm taken care of always. And that's been literally life-changing. So
that's so awesome. I'm going to come back to Max, but before I go there, Vacation Bible School. I just interviewed someone else who, for a story that I'm writing, that brought up Vacation Bible School and how crucial that was. And I'm thinking of my own experiences with Vacation Bible School. I had some really great memories too. Yeah. He said back when he was going to church, it was like 3 weeks long. And I mean, it was gosh. Like, yeah. And you did it right after school. And he said he was in an agricultural community, and like the farmers' mothers, he said, were a lot of the teachers, and they just loved it, and they would play baseball. I mean, I don't know. And I thought, wow, that's so interesting, because I had a really good experience too. And then I ended up like teaching little kids when I was older in high school, and loved that too. So just a shout out to the VBSs out there that maybe it's crazy. Maybe it doesn't seem like it's doing a lot, but you don't know what you're going to hook someone into, especially like if they're out of the regular classroom. There's like a little bit more of a freedom, and yet you're still with other people learning about good things. So did you have anything like that growing up, or anything like that to kind of anchor you a little bit, or Max?
So I'm not going to lie. When I was in my teenage years and high school years, I was a bad kid. I was getting into things that I wasn't supposed to. I came from a split home. And with that kind of came with a lot of turmoil in my life. And really the changing point in my life when I realized that I wanted to change my habits is when my stepbrother passed away in a car accident. And that's, I guess, is what forced me to get my stuff together. But as far as like a really concrete foundation in a relationship with God, I really didn't have that up until the last couple of years. And I really started to focus on that, I think, and really open my heart to that once my daughter was born.
Do you want to circle back to Cameron, right? Your stepbrother?
Yep.
How old were you when he passed? And tell me a little bit about that, because we've heard some about that in the paper, and I know Sarah, his mom. But tell me a little bit about how that affected you.
Yeah. So I was 19. I believe Cameron, he would have been 22 or 23, I believe, when he passed away. So I kind of came from a interesting situation. I've known Cameron since I was 5 years old, and I was really, really close friends with my stepbrother Preston before he became my stepbrother. In the 9th grade, I was best friends with him ever since I was 5 years old. So we were all really, really close. And when you have a tragic event in your life like that, I feel like it can kind of go one of two ways, especially when you're younger. You can really, really self-sabotage yourself, or you can be like, whoa, like life is fragile. Why am I wasting my life doing what I'm doing? Because when he passed away, I didn't really have any ambitions. I was just kind of working dead-end jobs. I had some really, really bad, I'd say, substance habits. Nothing like serious. Like I just was doing, I wasn't on the right path.
It wasn't helping.
No. And when he passed away, it's kind of like, okay, I don't want to just not have any meaning in my life. I need to kind of get my stuff together here. So I went from doing that to I ended up going to college for criminal justice, and then I worked in a correctional facility for a little bit and realized I didn't like that. And then that's kind of when I went to school for HVAC and started working for your husband and everything like that. But really, long story short, Cameron's death just kind of almost gave me a fire to kind of turn my life around and actually have aspirations and goals a little bit sooner than I think I would have developed that that fire in me.
Things get real when there's a death, especially of someone young like that. And you were really close in age. And not only that, but he was a part of your family. So it's one thing to read about something in the paper, hear it in the news, but when it is like involving your family, it's a little too close to ignore.
Yeah.
It seeps into your soul. And so that's awesome because I mean, we have a choice every day to move closer to God and further away. And it breaks my heart when people choose the path of going further away when we need him so much. We need God, the God who created us. Like he made the blueprint.
Right. Absolutely.
And he also, through his suffering on the cross, showed us that suffering isn't the last. So, So you're kind of moving into like how you both have kind of shared how your faith started kind of, how did that affect you? Because were you in his life at the time or not yet?
No, how old were you? You were 19?
Yeah.
So it had happened about 2 years, a year and a half, 2 years prior to us meeting.
Okay.
It's still very prevalent in our family.
Yeah.
Which I think is honest. It's a good thing. I think that there's a lot of glory around Cameron, but
you were aware.
Didn't really, I was definitely aware because it was a really big tragedy. I mean, Cameron was very, very well known from everyone. He was loved by so many people that everyone kind of knew about it. So,
so now you're kind of moving in. What were some of the things the support system that helped you, and how did that also affect like your world as you were moving closer to God? Like, did some things shift a little bit? How did you? Because when you're making that decision, for me, it was kind of like a back and forth. Like I was kind of struggling, like in my young adult years, like yes, no.
Yeah.
Like, do I really want to do this? Like there's a tug of war there, I think.
Yeah.
For a while.
So there's a term that I feel like is frequently used, and it's lukewarm. And I feel like for a long time, Max and I were living a lukewarm lifestyle. And I think sometimes we fall back into that because sometimes it's easier, especially with how the world is today. It's almost difficult to be a Christian sometimes. And I think that we really kind of do that back and forth thing because what we did is literally, I'm telling you, like 3 or 4 times a week, we would go out and drink every weekend and every week. And we would party and hang out with our friends. And we didn't even, like, when you drink, you don't even know your friends. Like, you just drink with your friends and know them when they're drinking. And it's like, we enjoyed that for whatever reason we did. And we still, even recently, I think in the past year, I have decided to quit drinking entirely. And Max doesn't really, he'll have some drinks, but it's not like he's not getting drunk. So that's the important part. And so for us, we have really lost a lot of friends in that process. We've lost so many friends, and our circle was huge. It was huge. And like I said before, we didn't really know them. So once we were, not partying and drinking, and our goal was to be a healthy and happy family and be the best parents for our daughter.
But I will say that it's almost nice to, even though our circle is smaller, the connections we have are just more meaningful. You know what I mean? Like,
for sure.
Because it's when you're with like-minded people, it's easier to see kind of them for who they are, especially when they're of Christian faith, and you kind of are the same age, going through the same struggles and have the same belief system. It's a lot more fulfilling than going out and
forgetting
doing
the whole
all
night.
That stuff.
It goes deeper.
It goes a lot deeper. Yeah.
You can kind of cut through the shallow stuff and get right to the meat of like, why are we here? Like, we're here to figure out how to live and then die, and then to live again. And so that's it. Like if we don't have that kind of figured out, then life is kind of meaningless. I'm curious from your perspective, Max, how that affected you? Because I feel like, even my husband and I are in different realms, and I feel kind of protected a little bit from the world in my job. And yet I'm kind of out there, but I still live in a little bit of a bubble, and definitely, have mostly friends like-minded,
Yeah.
Yep.
But like Troy's kind of out there in the world, and he has different challenges that way.
Yep.
And I think men in general, like it's just even the way you relate to people. Like women are more relational, and so we can kind of go to that deeper level where men are a little bit more superficial. So how do you move through like just like the world and kind of being a stronger Christian man? Is that hard?
So one thing that I've really, really struggled with is, it's one thing to like say you're a Christian and then you need to act like a Christian. You know what I mean? So when you're joking with people and stuff like that, when you're not a Christian, a lot of times it can be really, really vulgar. And sometimes I still struggle with not talking how I'm supposed to. But that's been a challenge that I've faced and that I'm actively trying to work on. Unfortunately, there are people that like talk poorly about like women. And that's something that I just don't do anymore. I always talk positively about my wife, things like that. And I'd say with men too, if you can relate through mutual hobbies, that's a really, really good way for young men to connect. And when I'm saying hobbies, going out to the bar and drinking is not a hobby. Go find something that you like and go hang out with like-minded people that like the things that you like. And for men, that's a really, really good way to build connections, because you're not sitting at the bar, which is super popular here, and drinking. And a lot of times when you're sitting at a bar with your friends, you're probably not talking about stuff that you should be talking about. You're probably not doing things that are godly. You know what I mean? So go out, find a hobby, go find a life group at a church. I've made a couple of friends through our church, just going through life groups, and I've gone out golfing with them. We've gone over to their house and we've hung out with them and their kids. You know what I mean? Like if you go out looking for meaningful connections, you can find them, but you're not always going to find them in the popular places for young people.
Right.
Go reach out to your church and go find young families in your church. There's plenty of groups in the area for young families.
Which I feel like is so, like if you would have said that to me when our relationship with God really started, like when we were really diving into that, I think that would scare me, hearing that, like, oh, go to your church and find friends.
Yeah.
Like it sounds scary, but I think that when you start living a Christian life and wanting that, things start falling into place. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Because for both of us, like, oh, giving up this, like that sounds not ideal to many people.
But there's so many people that are willing to do that. Like I remember our church, what really, really brought me close to God too is we went to, it's called an Alpha Bible study that our church holds. And our church is fairly young. And going there and seeing all the other young people there and making connections and learning about God with other young people really not only brought me closer to God because I was talking about God with people when we were at this group for, 2 hours, an hour or two?
Yeah, and they provided a meal, and the whole point of the group was it started with like the logistics of things and the historical events and like the proof that Jesus was here. And then it also opened a lot of ground for just questions, like real questions that you have, because you're like, well, how is God real? Like I can't see him. And it's like, well, if you really look, you can.
Yeah. And I'd like that you say that. Like when people are like, you can't see God, you know what I mean? How do you know that God is real? The people that say that God isn't real, I don't think have truly done their research. If you read the Bible and you just look at current events, past events, it's almost indisputable that he's real. And then if you actually chase that relationship with God and you feel the presence of the Holy Spirit, like at that point, there's just no questioning. So if people are ever out there like wondering, you need to pursue. You can't just sit there and wait for something magical to happen.
Yeah.
If people are truly wondering, I think they need to go out there and they need to pursue God, and they actually need to give got a chance.
Right. I was going to say it's got to be with an open heart, because if you're just going on the defense, and I mean, you'll find whatever evidence out there on the internet if you want to find a way to disprove God. But honestly, if you think about it, go back. I always say go back further. Like, I can see how it might, because you can't see God, but it's like, okay, but how are we here? How are we even here? Like, you can't have something from nothing. You can't, there's got to be something that initiated all this. It didn't just happen. Like, that is the biggest leap of faith, so keep going back. Like, I feel like a lot of people will just, take, like, they'll just start right here, but they don't, like, just keep thinking, go back.
Well, and what's amazing too, sorry if I cut you off there. What's amazing too, and what I always like to look into when it comes from not like the relationship side, but like the logical side. So when you look at all of the cross references, I don't remember the exact number, but there are thousands and thousands of cross references between the Old Testament and the New Testament. And when you look at all those cross references, it's how many coincidences become a fact. What do they say in science? Like 3 coincidences is a fact, or something along those lines. I don't remember exactly what it is, either, but there are thousands and thousands of cross references between those two books,
the
and
prophecies,
and there's no way that you can just make that up.
Yeah,
But
you have to look at it as a whole,
Absolutely.
and see how the Old Testament led into the New Testament.
Absolutely.
And then, you can look back and see all those points.
Like, people don't understand that those were written at 2 completely different time frames. And I think it's so silly when people are like, well, Jesus isn't real. It's like, what? Do you believe that Julius Caesar was real?
Right.
Do you believe that all these different historical figures are real? Even if you go to scientists who don't believe in the Holy Spirit, they will go and they will say that Jesus is real.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Jesus was a real physical person. And all these different religions, these major religions, they at least recognize Jesus as some sort of prophet. And so if, these different religions are saying, okay, yes, Jesus existed. I recognize him. Jesus is a good person, but I am God. And all these different religions are saying, like, okay, Jesus is real and he's a good guy. But then the guy that finally says, no, I am God. I am the Son of God. Why would I not want to follow that guy? All these different people are telling me he's a good dude. And then the good dude that everyone's saying that you can trust says, no, I'm God. I'm the Son of God. I'm going to go and I'm going to follow him.
Right. I've heard it said that he was the only founder of any religion that claimed that he was God. There's other religions that have, and I guess like Judaism is in there too, but it's crazy. So we delight in young people discovering that, because I feel like there's a lot in our generation where we kind of took it for granted in some ways, but we had to go through our own journey too. But the world was different back then. And now there's a lot of, I think, hopelessness in young people and despair. And so you guys had a little bit of that. You had the hopelessness,
for sure.
and I did too. Like, there was a moment in my life where I'm like, help God. Like, I am not in a good place, and I believed in him, but I just couldn't access him. And he responded. He did respond. He responds, and it's beautiful. Why don't we just talk a little bit about hope, and can you bring to people in your generation? Because I think that's who you're going to be speaking to here. Because there's a lot of people that have gone away from Christianity. We're kind of entering a pagan world right now.
Yeah. Absolutely.
We were in the midst of having literally nothing. We started dating right when COVID hit in about 2020. So I shouldn't say hit, but it was right in the middle of it. We both had it more than once. I was laid off for a long, long time, which wasn't the worst thing in the world because you were getting so much money on top of it. But
it's like, why would I ever want to go back to work?
Yeah, seriously. But it was depressing because you just, your purpose is kind of what you wake up every morning to do. And when I was waking up every morning and I had nothing, it's really hopeless. And I mean, Max was in the middle of kind of juggling with, should I work here? Should I work here? He was at a company he really didn't like when he started doing HVAC right away. And it took him a little while to find, Laney's where he loves to be. And we were just struggling. It's just, we didn't have like a schedule of life.
And it seemed like we were getting beat down at every single corner because, we're this young couple. And then all of a sudden, early on in our relationship, Micah's pregnant. Blessing, right?
Biggest blessing.
Every child is a blessing, But, we're both young. We don't know what we're doing in life. It's like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? And then on top of that, Micah ends up getting hyperemesis during her first pregnancy. And it was so bad that I don't remember the exact time frame. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think all the way from it was 7 weeks to around 28 weeks.
I was so sick. And I got pregnant very early on. I was so sick that I couldn't work, and I was at the hospital every single day getting infusions. So Max was in between jobs. There was
a point during COVID.
Yeah.
During COVID.
So it's I'm just starting my apprenticeship at Laney's. So like I'm a pre-apprentice. I'm not even in my own van yet. So I'm barely making any money, and here I am all of a sudden.
Providing for two adults during COVID.
Yeah, I'm providing for both of us. I'm paying both of our bills. It was just a crazy, crazy time.
I feel like the point, because we're kind of talking about the negatives of the situation, which were very negative. We were never completely down and out, which sounds ridiculous, but we never were. Something Max and I talk about very frequently is we've struggled financially for the whole time we've been together. Until recently. And we've never been without anything we need. We've always had. Yeah, we've always, we haven't had a choice.
Yeah.
There's times where, to be completely upfront, Max was making $16 an hour and supporting both of us.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine? That's nothing.
Car payment, truck payment, it all.
It was crazy.
But one thing, just to kind of add on to what you're saying, just to kind of give an example of the situation. So there was a time where we were really, really financially struggling, and this is even when McKinley was born, and we were, really, really leaning into God at this time. And we didn't know how we were going to pay our bills. We didn't know where money was going to come from. And I remember that we actually prayed on it, and not even kidding you, I think a day or two later, my dad owns a cleaning company. He goes, hey, if you want to come out here and if you want to make X amount of dollars, we're cleaning out this house for an estate sale of a hoarder. And he's like, it's a good opportunity for you to just, come out and make some extra money. Well, my dad didn't know that we didn't know how we were going to pay our bills. And then all of a sudden this opportunity lands in our lap.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of those things where we leaned into God, and he provided, and he gave us that opportunity. God will give you an opportunity to do what needs to get done. And
it's not always like easy. Like it's not a handout.
Yeah. But it's not like all of a sudden $200 magically goes and drops in my bank account.
Mm-hmm.
But my dad's been doing it for 3 years, and that is the only time he has ever called me for help.
Yep.
And it was the one time that we really, really leaned into God. So God opens doors when you lean into him.
I have to go here, okay? Because I'm thinking about the baby. And did you ever think of abortion? Because that is such a refrain right now. I just want to hear.
Yeah, that was never an option for us. It's funny because, we were very early in our relationship, so I didn't know how Max was going to react. I was scared that I was going to just have a baby daddy. I was just gonna.
That's horrible.
I loved him, and I did trust him, but we were early on, and having a baby is so scary.
Yeah.
And we were young and we weren't doing the greatest, but when we found out that I was pregnant, I texted Max that I was pregnant because he was at work and I think I was at home. I worked at a bar. So I usually didn't work till 4 p.m. So I texted him and his response was, well, don't you need to be on prenatals? And I was like, yes.
Well, I did some research. She said she's pregnant. And I'm like, so
already going into protection.
Yeah, that wasn't even like a thought in my head. I'm like, okay, she's pregnant. I'm going to be dealing with her no matter what for 18 years of my life now.
Better take care of her. But yeah, we never, did we even talk about it?
No, I don't even think it was a conversation.
And the only reason I asked was just because it's so prevalent right now. It's just like being yelled all the time. And there's so many misconceptions about it. But talking about leaning in, like that baby almost like provided a way for you to lean in even further, right?
Yes.
Because now you've got
McKinley,
2 people that you're providing for.
And that's what really, me personally, what kind of like opened the door for me to like lean into God. Because even though having a baby is awesome and I was excited, I was scared, I was all sorts of emotions, I honestly felt hopeless. Because I was like, holy smokes, it is time to grow up. It is time to cut out all of my past, and it is time to provide. And that's when I think Micah would agree with this, that I really actually started to give God a chance in my life. And I cannot tell you how much he's not only helped me personally, but when me and Micah go through rough spots in our marriage, when we lean into God, when we lean into our church, I mean, there are some times where I don't know how we would have gotten through some of the things we've gone through without God. I really don't.
Like we were not dealt like easy. We've been given so much difficult things to go through, and we have struggled so much, but we have also grown so much and matured so much that I feel like we've needed those things to kind of grow up. And, you know, God may have put those kind of different things on our plates to show us like, hey, if you don't change, like this isn't going to be good. So for us, I feel like every time we've leaned into God, he's never left us with empty arms. Like he's always provided. And,
well, you know, I was thinking earlier, Max, you were talking about how there's 2 roads, right? You either go this way or that way.
Yeah.
And I think that moment where you're like, you're a father. You're a father. Like if there's nothing that's going to wake you up and turn you into a man, I can't imagine anything more than realizing that you're a father. Yeah. That you're already a father.
Yep.
But you could have chosen 2 different roads. I'd really, before we go to break, I want to hear from both of you what you would say to another young couple facing this who might be tempted towards abortion. And I wasn't meaning to go in this direction at all. This wasn't part of my questioning. It's just comes up as you're telling the story of your daughters coming into existence, because I think it's so important right now.
I'll say this one thing is that I felt all the emotions. I was terrified. I didn't know how I was going to provide for a little girl. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know what it meant to be a dad. I didn't know what that looked like. But I will tell you right now that being a father is the most, what am I trying to say? The most gratifying thing that I've ever gone through. I mean, sure, it's difficult. It can be frustrating sometimes, but there is nothing better than the gift of having a child that you can love. You know, and I think that's just, I wouldn't change that for the world. My daughter is awesome. It made me grow closer with Micah. It made me love Micah more, watching Micah be a mom and learning from her, honestly, because Micah is very, very patient when it comes to being a parent. So learning from her, it's a beautiful experience. And even if you're scared, it's something that is worth cherishing, and you'll figure it out. You have to.
Yeah.
When you have a kid, you have to figure it out. It's no longer like,
and you should.
Yeah. Yeah. It's no longer like it's just me. Like, no, it forces you to figure out your life. So don't be scared. Lean into God and realize how big of a gift you have in front of you.
An eternal gift. You know? Like we all came from nothing. Yeah. We were God's thought. So what about you, Micah? Like,
so
there's girls out there, maybe as we're running this that might be in that situation.
For sure. So I feel like as a woman, it's a little bit different just because, everyone says, it's my choice. And, that is technically true. However, the way that I think of it is children are a blessing. God doesn't make mistakes. And it is not my right to decide, what humans live and what humans don't.
Yeah.
That's really kind of harsh, but it's true.
Yeah.
And for me, it couldn't have been worse timing. It really, really couldn't have been worse timing. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I was with someone that I loved, but I wasn't 100% sure about. We weren't married. I mean, we weren't there yet. And we loved that baby as soon as we knew about her. We were so scared that something could happen. I mean, you should have, every time that we've had an ultrasound with McKinley, Max always grabs my hand because he's so excited. And it's you can see the little baby moving around at 6 weeks, heartbeat, moving their little nubs, doing all of they're there. They're and it's that is 50% of me and 50% of someone I love very much. And sometimes that's not the case. It's not always someone you love. And sometimes it can be even worse situations. But it's crazy to me to think of taking someone out of the world before they even have a chance to live their life or, do amazing things because, there's, certain people that you just think of in the world and imagine that these people have made such huge changes in the world, just that one person. And imagine their parents didn't offer them the chance at life.
Yeah.
And they didn't make the changes in the world that they did, and
I even think someone who maybe isn't famous or hasn't done anything phenomenal, just their presence, to be honest, increases love in the world.
Absolutely.
Because we have an opportunity to love that person and they have an opportunity to love others. And I think the more love there is in the world, the better the world is. And so when we take out a potential for someone to give and receive love, that's huger than we can understand.
For me, when I got pregnant, I planned to work throughout my pregnancy, go back to work, send our daughter to daycare, all of these things. And having her was God's way of showing me that, that's what I meant to do. I meant to, raise my daughter, raise Max and I's kids, show her the way of the world. Yeah. And we decided I was going to stay at home. So now I'm a stay-at-home mom. And that is my dream. It's the best thing that's ever happened to me. And I never would have known that had I not had her.
It totally focuses everything. And the same thing happened to me. I tried to work and it's my baby needs me. Yes. And so we had to rearrange our life. Yeah. We rearranged our life around this person who is still with us and is 29 now. It's crazy. They grow up and then they have their own lives and their own effect in the world. But it certainly makes you grow up. And also I love what you said about it is both of each of you, and there's something that really changes a relationship when you have something in common like that bodily and spiritually is part of each of you.
Yeah. And the love you feel for your kids. I mean, it's just it's indescribable. I mean, it's such a, I love her so, so much that I just could not imagine life without her. And
kind of love that changes you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. For the better.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Well, let's take a little break on that note and we'll come back and figure out the next steps here in this conversation. But thank you, Micah and Max. And we'll be right back with where did all the young faith-filled families go after this?
Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month. You'll get unlimited access to the news you need to stay engaged and connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe now to get 3 months of local news for only 99 cents a month.
Well, welcome back to Matters of Soul Importance. I have Max and Micah here, and we're having a good discussion about faith, and especially in a young couple, which is good. It's good for us to kind of hear from them, hear from the generations coming up that are going to lead us into these next decades. And so, but where did all the young faith-filled families go? We've had a shift in our Christian makeup of at least the United States, and we're slowly watching it. Well, actually, not slowly, quickly watching our world become more pagan and more anti-Christian. And so, to be a young couple professing the faith, professing Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior is a bolder thing now than even when I was growing up. So I'm really, again, honored to have you both today. I've heard young people say pretty emphatically that Christianity maybe worked for you, but it's no longer needed. We have new ways of doing things. We're younger generations. We have our own ways. What would you say to that? Max, why don't you start by responding?
I would just say that without knowing it, the Christian faith is in their life, but not in a positive way. So if you look at and I wouldn't even say Christian faith, I'm going to say that the devil is in their life. Because if you look at popular music, if you look at the concerts people are going to, if you look at all the stuff recirculating on social media, movies, I mean, everything that these young people are consuming, it's of the devil. There's a lot of these celebrities that people my age and younger are worshiping and are super, super into. They openly worship the devil. And when you're listening to those things and you're allowing those kind of things in your life, you are allowing the devil in your life, and millions of people don't know that that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
Why is the devil such a popular thing in pop culture right now? There's a reason for that. And when you're going and you're listening to music, when you're watching, maybe shows that are sexual, you're consuming pornography. I mean, all these things that are super popular, that is all of the devil. And so right now, you're allowing the devil in your life, and I bet it doesn't feel good. I bet you're looking for a change in your life, and you can find that through God. You really can.
Let me be the devil's advocate here. I'm going to be someone I'm not. I'm going to say, that is just silly. There is really no devil. No, these are just things we're just having fun. That's not even a real thing. Yeah. That's weird.
I would just ask you why it's everywhere. Say, why is the trend that you're seeing with the devil, why is that everywhere?
I think that just kind of a more, I guess, calmer approach than kind of Max's understanding, which I totally actually agree with, because I am very I see it very, very clearly. And I feel like if you don't see it, that's kind of what the goal is to not see it. If you have Christ in your life, it's almost like viewing life through a new lens. You get a sense of discernment, and you can just feel when things aren't right. A lot of people like to live the way that they want to live without being judged. And that is the reason that people choose not to be Christian, I feel like, a lot of the time, because they don't want to be judged for what they're doing, even though they know it's wrong. That's really convenient for people to live that way. Is it right? Absolutely not. And that's not the way that God intended the world to be. When you're given a rule book, a lot of people are like, I don't want to follow that. I want to do whatever I want to do that makes me feel happy. Well, instant gratification is not the way to joy and the way to peace. And our world is all about instant gratification.
Yeah.
And it's really unfortunate. And if you are not following Christ and following Jesus, the devil will find their way into your life. A lot of people open the door happily for the devil with different kind of spirit realm opening things.
Well, I was
that's
gonna
not
touch on that too. There's a lot of people that say like you said, that Christianity doesn't work, spirituality doesn't work. Right now, there's so many people that are doing tarot card readings. They're doing, they believe in gemstones and stuff like
and
this, or like your, what is that called? Your astrology sign. That's all spiritual, and people don't realize that.
It's real.
It's all real, but it's not from God.
Yeah.
You know.
There's a podcast called The Exorcist Files, and it's kind of about that. It's a priest that has done exorcisms, and he goes back into his files and kind of explains. And then there's like some teaching in there too, so it's not like all freaky, but they do a really good job.
Yeah,
it's getting a lot of attention because it is such a big thing right now. One of the things he said in a recent interview, Father Carlos Martins, was that there's a huge rise in 18 to 29-year-olds leaving the faith, and also a huge rise in those same 18 to 29-year-olds believing that people can become possessed. So they are actually aware of evil. They've seen it in some level, but because of that chasm, they've left the faith, but they see it, and some believe it on some level. There's nothing they don't have the antidote. The antidote is Christ. And earlier, Max, when you were saying people are saying that Jesus didn't even exist, I thought, okay, let's really think about that. Why are they saying that when obviously there's so much evidence just historically, do they not want him to exist? Is it inconvenient for him to not exist because of what you were saying, Micah? They don't want to have to be accountable. They want the freedom. Unfortunately, freedom in quotes is actually enslavement. And that's where I feel sad for not just younger generations, but any generation that has fallen prey. It's a false freedom.
Yeah, and I think a large part of that is like social media. Like social media, it makes it so easy for people to get wrapped up on superficial things instead of focusing on what matters, and unfortunately, I think the younger you are, the more wrapped up you are in that. So, and the more normalized everything is. I mean, if you're sitting in front of a screen all day and you're seeing these things all day, every day, you become desensitized to the abnormal. And that's what we're seeing, I think.
Yeah, I remember being told by someone when I was in middle school, and I went to public school. I remember them telling me something that was kind of vulgar, but kind of inappropriate, but saying, we should be prideful of those things. And in my head, I was like, well, and they made me feel very badly because I was like, well, that doesn't seem right to me. Like, that just seems kind of wrong. Like, I kind of said that to her, and she's like, well, that's very hateful. You shouldn't act like that. That's very hateful. So I went home and I talked to my parents about it, and I was like, my friend told me that we should praise this kind of action. And I don't think we should put hate onto anybody. I think everyone should be loved. But saying things should be glorified when they're not of God is not something that should be pushed on to children. I was 11 years old when my friend was telling me about this, and it was something I was exposed to and never even had heard of until I went to, public school. And, something I always think of too is, you're not allowed to talk about God at school when you're in public school. That's not even allowed. So
that's so interesting. Taking your very innocent but natural inclination to see the wrongness of something, and then someone's calling you hateful. Yeah. Do we realize what we're doing? That is a difference from when I grew up. We weren't meeting those kinds of ideologies on the playground that I remember.
Well, I have a young guy. Well, he went to college now, but he was just riding with me very recently. And he said that some of the groups that are in high schools right now, you would not believe. And it's all revolved around sexual orientation and stuff like that. It's why are we pushing that so hard in the public school system and down our kids' throats?
Yeah. It's a good question.
When kids are, they're kids. Adolescents under 18.
And now you're father, mother.
And you're very different.
Yeah.
But switcheroo here, now you've got to think about your child and what kind of world your child's living in. And you've had that protectiveness since the very beginning, Max, of, are you taking your prenatal vitamins? I don't know who you are, but are you right away you were jumping into father mode. And that's the natural, that is how it should be. Men are naturally defenders of life and protectors. That's our natural predisposition. And And when you're when we're in the God-given roles, that's when we flourish. That's why you're enjoying being an at-home mom now, because your world has been focused on what naturally is who you are.
Mm-hmm.
We're all mothers, even those who aren't natural mothers.
Yeah.
We all, as women, have an inclination to mother. We're relational.
Mm-hmm.
When we step into those roles, that's when peace and joy come.
Yeah.
And then to have a community that's supporting that is so important.
Absolutely.
And it seems like it's getting more and more important. Like you need that. We don't always, that base isn't there in the culture anymore. So we have to go searching for it. So that's kind of the brunt of the discussion here. How do young people step into that? And you know, I was thinking earlier when you were describing like becoming Christian and kind of going into that world, and it's kind of scary. I was thinking it was like different times I've had to change my eating habits. And like at first it's like, do I want to change all this and give up this? And then I had to reframe it like, no, what can I start eating more of?
Yeah.
And maybe more healthy things instead of junk food, you know?
Yeah.
It's kind of like giving up junk food and giving up the drinking life and all of the things. And it is scary because it's like, that's what you've been kind of tethering yourself to, but there's a freedom, but you need others. We need others like God made us for others. So share a little bit about going into that community and not being afraid to take hold of the true freedom, which you found.
I think everybody kind of has this feeling inside of them of like, they know what's right. You know, we see all this stuff in society, and deep down in your gut, doesn't matter who you are, I think you truly know what's right and how you're supposed to live. And I would just say lean into that. And as far as like getting into Christianity as like young people and young couples, do what feels right. You know, or even if you don't know what feels right, if you're depressed, you're lost, you don't have a purpose, and you don't have anything to lose, go find purpose, you know, and that can be found through Jesus Christ. And you can find that if you reach out to your local church. Any church is going to be more than happy to help you find that. Most churches are going to make you feel super welcome no matter who you are. And even if some of your personal beliefs maybe go against what is godly, still go to church, because that's exactly where we want you. If you're not living godly, we want you in church so you can know God. And that's what I would say to a lot of young people that are maybe scared to take that first step.
I think Christianity is getting a bad rap.
Yeah.
What would you say to combat that? Because that's maybe the hardest thing to overcome, is just, like you said, getting there. Like when people are like, oh, Christians are mean. How do you...
I'd never judge. So I'm a Christian and I don't judge you. So let me just say, for instance, like if you're transgender, you know, I don't hate you. I don't judge you. I want you to know God. You know, even medical experts, they will say that, you know, being transgender, it's gender dysphoria. And I'm just using this as an example. It's gender dysphoria. It's a true medical diagnosis. And how they're treating gender dysphoria, I don't agree with. But if there was somebody that is struggling with that, I'm sure that they're a group that feels judged by Christians. We shouldn't be judging you. We should be welcoming you. Mm-hmm. You know, when you see how Jesus operated, I mean, he was going tax collectors. He was inviting tax collectors to follow him, demon-possessed people to follow him, you know, thieves to follow, you know, people that maybe wouldn't be seen as Christian. That's who he was inviting to have a relationship with him. And we need to be the same.
I think the hard thing is that disagreement on some certain actions, which we should judge actions, but not hearts.
Yep.
And it's been flipped a little bit, where even if we have a difference of opinion, now we hate.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate. And it's a ploy of the evil one who doesn't want us to get close to God.
Yep.
But what about you, Micah? What would you say to people that are, maybe there's like, I believe what Max said, that we're all made with goodness. And on the deepest level, we at least know when something's not good and not right. And so how do you attract people to a church community?
Yeah. So for me personally, I have always, struggled with, shame that I wasn't good enough, shame that I didn't belong in certain groups of people. And I have never felt that way at my church. something that the Bible says is that no one sin is greater than the other. So, people who feel like the way that they're acting is not sinful and maybe don't agree with what the Bible says, it doesn't mean that they're ostracized from the church. They will be welcomed to the church because, we're all humans and we do sin every single day, whether we try really, really hard not to, which we should, or we don't. God loves us all equally, and he's on the other side of the door waiting for you to open it. If someone isn't making you feel welcome in the church, that is not really how Christians are supposed to act.
And there might be some of those characters.
Absolutely.
That's the thing, but they don't define the church.
Yeah.
They define humanity.
Right.
Yeah, because that's just the reality of it. There's going to be people who are hateful, and then there's people who are loving, and we would hope that, Christians all around would be loving. Just because you don't agree with one thing that we don't agree with, or maybe many things, that doesn't mean that you won't be loved. I think everyone should have a relationship with God and deserves to have a relationship with God. And good things will come out of that. No matter who you are, good things will come out of that. And if you don't have a relationship with God, it allows more room for, the devil to creep in. So those people who are struggling to find a relationship with God, find a church you're comfortable with. And sometimes that takes, church shopping, literally. You have to go to multiple churches until you find one that, you're comfortable with, and that's fine, but find one because it's worth it.
Oh yeah. It's life-changing having a community. And yeah, I kind of like what you said, like you can judge actions, but not the heart.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's when you love somebody, you hold them accountable.
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
So I think actually our pastor was just talking about that. He was talking about how even Jesus was firm, and I don't remember who it was in one of the biblical stories, but basically that he was doing wrong and Jesus disagreed with him, and Jesus kind of put him in his place, not out of hate, not hatefully, but you can correct somebody and say that they're wrong while still loving them.
Mm-hmm.
And
if you didn't correct someone who you thought was doing something wrong, I think that is worse.
Yeah.
And you
absolutely.
can always use charity, and we try to, and that we should, but ignoring or being passive about something. Another thought I had is, as we're searching for, is God real? Is the devil real? I mean, I think let's figure that out. And then again, you're talking about two different paths. Do you want to follow that or that? And I think people are acknowledging that, there is evil. So is that where you want to go? And it's hard. It's sneaky.
Yeah.
But your church community can help you sort through that too. And that's another thing. And they're not going to be perfect because only Jesus is perfect.
Yeah.
But that guiding light is there. So.
And I do think that we're going to see a switch here too.
That was my next question. Do you have hope? I want to hear it from the young people here.
I do think that we're going to see a switch. And I think we already are seeing a switch. The world has gotten so crazy, and just coming back to that common sense feeling that everyone kind of has within them. I think the crazier and crazier the world gets, the more people are going to be A, looking for answers, and B, opening their eyes. And I think you're already starting to see that. I mean, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I saw something about even how just homeschooling numbers in the recent decade is at a record high. That in itself should tell you something. I'm not saying that homeschooling is inherently Christian, but that in itself is telling you people are saying, hey, I don't like what's going on. There's an issue here. And with today being, like you said, increasingly pagan, that should speak to you, and that should speak to people saying like, hey, people see that there's an issue going on here.
Well, I heard a discussion in that it was even a wider view that like back in biblical times, there was no schools. People just learn in their homes. They learn from their families. And again, my mom's a teacher. She was a teacher in a public school for many years, but that is the way the world has been. But yeah, it seems like some things are breaking down here and it's not working anymore. And the values that we want to impart in our kids, we don't want our kids to be swallowed up.
Absolutely.
And I'm seeing more people coming out and saying like, hey, it's okay for you to want to be a wife. it's okay for you to want to lean into your motherly instincts and do that. And it's okay for a man to want to provide and protect, because there's a giant attack on traditional family.
Yes.
And there has been so many young people that even I personally know of that are saying, like, I don't want that. I want to have a traditional life. I want to break out of this. What's going on in the world isn't right. And
why is it impossible to live off of a single income in your home?
Well, and that is tough, but it's right now. I think the voices of the pagan voices and like the world is so loud right now because it's so outlandish, and people see that,
It's just like this godlessness is just coming out, like vomiting out of people. And a lot of people don't even see it. I just want to say, I mean, like a lot of people do not even know that they're inviting evil in. But so here you are and other Christians that are trying to live a good life and being like a witness and standing up and saying no. To that and saying there's a better way. And your daughter provided that. And now you're expecting another one. So every little new life is just a witness to Christ and his goodness and what's possible, and that if we trust in him, he will provide. He's going to protect us. And that doesn't mean everything's going to be great. You guys know it's hard, and we struggled a lot too, and still do. So but he is the antidote. And I'm so grateful for both of you today sharing your perspective. It's wonderful. Any closing thoughts about the topic at hand that you wanted to throw out here?
Yeah, I guess something that's really big about Christianity that I never understood until I was older and it was told to me is making it a priority to serve others around you at all times is huge. So huge, because if we're living a selfish life, it's really sad. And if everyone was constantly serving those around each other, there'd be so much more love in this world. And I think that is such a huge thing that God asks us to do.
And sometimes it's just being a mom and changing a diaper and making sure your child is fed. Like it's hard sometimes in those years where you're at home and there can be struggles there and you feel like you want to do more, but sometimes that's serving God. Right? Christ in your midst, the vulnerable, the helpless is your child. So, and there's no better way to bring goodness into the world than pouring goodness into your own mothering. So,
absolutely.
What about you, Max? Any final thoughts?
I guess just for all the younger generation and my generation, don't be scared. If you feel like something's missing, go look for it. And I'm pretty confident that you can go and you can find it in Jesus Christ.
What about our question? Do you think, are those faith-filled young families still out there, but just kind of in hiding right now, and they're going to come
we've
up
seen
here?
them. We've seen them.
No, sure. I can tell you right now that
you're not the only ones.
No, we're not the only ones. They are alive and well. I think why people, like I said, why people aren't noticing them is because right now the world is so loud. And with the world being so loud, you're not going to notice I don't want to say
the comfortable
normal,
ones.
but the people that aren't loud, we kind of have more of a quiet lifestyle, and the people that have a loud lifestyle, that's just who you guys are going to notice.
That's the bar scene.
That's right. Exactly.
Sometimes the people who aren't yelling and screaming about everything are the people you should talk to.
Yeah. I think there's a lot more level-headed people out there than people might realize.
Or maybe we need to be yelling and screaming about Jesus more.
I
don't know. Maybe we need to start doing that.
At least, right? At least raising our voices about him, praising and glorifying him.
I'll tell you what, though, one way to really praise God is just to talk about him. That's why I like what you're doing so much. So even if you're in a social setting, if you're a Christian, don't be scared just to even say like, oh, I thank God for this. Like even something as small as that, like, oh, God is so good. Saying something like that around people that might not even believe in God, it at least is going to, spark something in their brain and say, oh, he's giving it all to God, or this guy talks about God a lot and he's so happy and so nice. I want what he has. So just be a living example of that.
Absolutely.
I think that's one of the best ways to serve God.
I have to shout out to my husband because I've been working on like converting people and bringing them to Jesus for a long time. And like, I think Troy has done more on that regard. Like there's just been little stories that we've heard and I'm like, wow, you're making a bigger impact by just being more in the world and just sharing about your faith than I have like being explicit about it. So there's definitely something to be said about that. When we hear the truth, it hits us in the heart.
Yeah.
And you guys are a great example of that. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. And God bless you both. And congratulations on your new little one that's getting ready to be born.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
So where did all the young faith-filled families go? According to Max and Micah Fischer, they're living among us, maybe just not as loudly as some. But a fire of love is burning within them, and it's not one that will be easily quelled. I didn't know a lot about Max and Micah, who are only in their mid-20s, before our interview. Only that they were a Christian couple excited to talk about their faith. And because this seems to be a perspective deserving of some airtime, I jumped at the chance to have them on as guests. Hearing about their surprise pregnancy shortly after they met, and about how their daughter, now 3, helped them refocus their priorities, was heartwarming. While admitting he was terrified at first upon seeing the text, "I'm pregnant," something powerful and innate was stirred up within Max, the calling of fatherhood and a drive to provide for and protect his family. He summed up his thoughts about fatherhood this way: "There's nothing better than having a child that you can love." Listening to Micah talk about the unique ways God claimed her attention and then opened her heart to the sublimity of motherhood brought back memories of my own young mothering days, when I too discovered one of my greatest purposes of life as a new mom. In time, I would learn the many ways dying to self as a mother would stretch me and make me a better person. The story of the Fischers is just beginning, and yet wisdom can come at any age. Sometimes it comes through hardship, as it did in the lives of Max and Micah. Despite their struggles and the uncertainty of their path, as they followed the gentle calling of God more and more, they began reordering their lives to serve Him. The more they've trusted in Him, the more He's proven Himself worthy of that trust. Hearing Micah talk about the importance of living for others and serving those in need was a beautiful reminder of what we're all called to in this life. The final balm to my soul was when Max talked about the turnaround that he fully believes is coming, because, as he said, the crazier things become, the more people, including the young, are waking up and demanding something better. Let's all hope and pray for that better world, which will only be possible through a thorough turning toward Christ, the Savior of the world. In our next episode, Dr. Stacy Trasankos, a chemist who is also versed in theology and philosophy, and who claims the motto, "Science is the study of the handiwork of God," will answer the question, science or scientism? What's the diff? Until then, don't lose sight of the light.